Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting into God of Hammers because we ain't talked about Thor in a minute. So to start this off, we're gonna do a bit of catching up as far as what's happened since Devourer King, but then also we'll talk about how God of Hammers, as well as the events leading up to it, have really been a part of this huge cycle that has been repeating and overlapping for billions of years. But not only are we shown this cycle in issue 19, but we're also shown what stage of the cycle God of Hammers is landing in. But on top of that, there's also a few prophecies that we see Thor juggling at this time that gotta be addressed as well. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with us getting into Thor God of Hammers, this is something that's been brewing up throughout the entirety of Thor Volume 6, and technically you could say that it's been brewing longer than that, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why through the course of this, but just to get caught up to the start of God of Hammers, this builds on top of what we'd seen in issue 1, with Thor recently becoming king, and with doing so him noticing that Mjolnir was getting heavier and heavier, which for a while, like we'd seen, this had led Thor to believe that he was struggling to lift Mjolnir as a result of his transition from warrior to king, which wasn't the case, but with the number of people who had been lifting Thor's hammer, who weren't Thor, skyrocketing on top of him struggling to lift it, this is what initially caused him to craft that theory. And understandably so, because the number of people lifting Mjolnir, not even just in this series, but also collectively around this time, it had made it seem like all of a sudden everybody was just worthy. But also with cases where we saw either Tony Stark or Eddie Brock summon Mjolnir, which from Thor's perspective, with him seeing this, it seemed to solidify his theory as far as him becoming unworthy, with him becoming king and not being full-time warrior. But this also stacked on top of a number of insecurities he'd been dealing with while he was trying to figure this out. Because if Thor, the king of Asgard, if he can't lift or control his hammer, for him it just seems like a sign of weakness. And so what this led to for Thor was pretty much a solution of him doing an Odin's Son reset by summoning Dr. Donald Blake, which is something Thor hadn't done in a long time. But of course, that also went left when the Midgard Serpent made its way to Dr. Blake first, to where then Donald Blake took the Midgard Serpent's power, and when Blake came back, he was just out for everybody who was touched by Odin's magic. And with how this played out, it was such a good story. We probably need to go back and just hone in on this one itself, because the 6-part series Prey, it took Donald Blake as an individual character to a whole nother level, especially with him finding out that he was just a means of teaching Thor a lesson, and that pain that he felt when he discovered the truth, it kinda made you root for him. Until he came across Throg, because when Throg stepped in, he definitely stole the show for a little while. Like, the gnashing of teeth was no joke. But after Prey was settled and the new solution for Donald Blake was figured out, this experience pushed Thor to make his next decision, with this taking him to a place where he truly felt helpless. And with how this ended with Thor making a call as the king of Asgard, which also was a call against Odin's wishes, but with Thor doing this, it made him realize that he is stepping into the role of king. And with Thor believing that his transition from warrior to king is causing him to lose his ability to lift Mjolnir, he goes to meet with Captain America at Avengers Mountain and he leaves Mjolnir there. Only then for Thor to get the call like 2 issues later that Mjolnir has been stolen, which really is the call that sets the stage for God of Hammers, because now you have like this mystery of who took Mjolnir and the hunt for finding Mjolnir and bringing it back. But from here, where God of Hammers kicks off, it starts like a run through of the history of the Marvel Universe, but of course doing this with more of the modern details included, with it mentioning the Elder Gods, the Ancient Giants, as well as the Black Winter, the God Tempest, the King in Black, and the Phoenix. But most significantly, we're being shown this because there's a cycle that repeats. In this cycle that we're being shown, it's been demonstrated for ages. And in this example, we're taken back billions of years ago, where 2 titans clashed. There's blood, there's fire, there's rage, and born from the forge of that rage, there was annihilation. Where in this case, we're shown as an example, the debris from one planet being destroyed, causing the annihilation of the dinosaurs. But again, the emphasis of this introduction, it's very much focusing on the cycle itself, more so than the details of this first example, because even billions of years later, this cycle from fire to gods to rage to annihilation, which leads to entropy, and with that chaos and uncertainty, it flows into eternity. But within these last 2 steps of the cycle, seeds are planted that will eventually blossom, and from each one of those that blossom, from them the cycle just continues. And it's here where we're shown more specifically with Mjolnir, where a piece of a moon that was made entirely of Uru metal crash landed on Nidavellir, to where from there, as we know, Odin trapped the god Tempest in this piece of Uru, which he then had the dwarves forge into Mjolnir. And this portion is taken out of Jason Aaron's Mighty Thor, issue 12, back when we were given the more in-depth story about the creation of Mjolnir, with us seeing Odin weaken the god Tempest and trap it within this piece of Uru that would be forged into the hammer. And really what's happening here at the beginning of God of Hammers is that we're being shown the cycle continuing from that seed to two other titans clashing, and born from the forge of that rage, annihilation, which would then go into entropy, and from entropy into eternity. And in this case within itself, we're shown that the fire, the gods, the rage, the annihilation, the entropy, in the final phase, eternity, that this second full cycle that we're shown is the creation of Mjolnir, which also along the way includes Odin trying to control the hammer, which flew him all around Asgard, nearly destroying the place, which at the time Odin did make people swear never to tell a soul, for him then to place an enchantment on the hammer which would make it impossible for almost anyone to lift. But the story of Mjolnir within itself, it was a full cycle. Odin's enchantment was the entropy, and the Tempest being trapped in the hammer represented eternity. But then after us seeing that the creation of Mjolnir was another cycle, which like we just seen, it ended with eternity, but now we're shown here that in a world of gods and titans that not even eternity can last forever. And well after the creation of Mjolnir, we're shown where a new cycle begins again, which takes us to Jason Aaron's Mighty Thor issue 12, which once again starts this new cycle with the Clash of Titans. And at this time when Jane tied Mangog to Mjolnir and cast them into the sun, this continues the cycle much like we were shown earlier, with the dark and the light, which is how it starts with the gods, which then takes us to the next step with the blood and the fire, to where in this case the battle itself was the blood, and after when Mjolnir and Mangog got tossed into the sun, that took it to the fire, and then next when Mjolnir returned, this then took us into the current day, to where at this point in the cycle we land on rage, which is something I kind of want you to just keep in the back of your mind through the course of this event. But at this point here where we pick up with Thor, not long after he'd gotten the news from Captain America about Mjolnir being stolen, and he makes his way to Sif telling her to point him to the person who stole Mjolnir. But Sif tells Thor that she sees nothing, which throws both of them for a loop, because you would think Sif would be able to see someone breaking into Avengers Mountain and taking Mjolnir. But then it's here where Sif tells Thor that now that Beta Ray Bill is back, let him take care of this, so that Thor can go back to his throne and just be king. But then it's here where Thor tells Sif that he had read from the Great Tome of Kings, which is a book that has gone from Buri to Bor to Odin to Thor, which has been passed down from king to king, and the words in this book can only be seen by the true king of Asgard, with it being written and read only by them, with it holding secrets of the past as well as some information about the future. And it's here where Thor tells Sif that he'd been reading this thing for days without food or sleep. And as far as what Thor had read from it pertaining to what's to come, he told her that it speaks of a great storm, the likes of which we've never seen, brought forth by Mjolnir, wielded by a being known as the God of Hammers. And it goes on to say that this being will kill the Golden King of Asgard, and his soul will be trapped in the fire forevermore. And so with Thor telling this to Sif, there's two things I want to point out here, because first, in issue 8, we learned that there's more in this book that Thor hasn't discovered yet, which for Thor also leaves room for some misinterpretation. But then also in issue 16, not long after Thor had left Mjolnir at Avengers Mountain, he had a conversation with Jane Foster about his death, which he was shown by the Black Winter, to where in that instance he had went into more detail with Jane. But just to be clear, the vision that Thor had seen from the Black Winter, with him being killed by Thanos holding Mjolnir, and what he had read from the Tome of Kings, these are two different events. But with Thor being shown the death of Thor, on top of reading the fate of the Golden King of Asgard, in this moment with him only mentioning what he had read from the book, he lets Sif know that he's not going to let this book tell him how he's going to die, with Thor at this point making his own interpretation of what the Tome of Kings is telling him. But at this point, with Sif not able to see who they're looking for, Thor just tells her to tend to the things that she can see, and in the meantime send him to his old man, which from here sends us over to Odin, who at this time is in an arena that has no earthly translation as far as the name of this place, and for those who can translate, they can't agree upon a name. And aside from that, no one agrees on its origin. But also for just a bit of context here, the reason why we're finding Odin at this location is because not long after Thor had dropped off Mjolnir, him and Odin were summoned to Vanheim by Freya, only to then find out that it was really his sister Angela that called them both there, and likely doing so because if she said it was her, then Thor and Odin wouldn't have showed. But at this point between issues 16 and 17, Angela lets them know that she'd brought them here because she's seen the chaos going off around Thor, from the Black Winter to the death of Galactus at Thor's hand, Donald Blake, the World Serpent, Mjolnir, and how these unfolding events are of the growing entropy of Odin's enchantments, which in other words, considering this huge cycle that we were just shown, the fulfillment of the entropy, it follows rage. And that we'll definitely talk about more through the course of this event. But with Angela calling them to Valheim and bring this to their attention, she lets Thor and Odin know that the son can learn from the father and the father can learn from the son, because the consequences of what happens to the throne, they affect everyone. But with this conversation rubbing Odin the wrong way, because he knows that he's done plenty, regardless of a lot of it being questionable. But with Angela telling Odin and Thor to clean this up, Odin more or less takes it as an insult, but then it doesn't help when Angela then tells Thor to either clean up his kingdom or she'll have to take it from him. But with this short family reunion causing things to go left, Freya told Angela to take Odin and go somewhere so that her and Thor could have a talk about what he was told about the Phoenix. But this moment here was really more of a conversation of the two of them talking about Thor dealing with these revelations more than anything else. But regardless of the fact of who Thor's actual mother is, she tells Thor she's not Gia, she's not the Phoenix, but she is the woman who raised him. And when Thor spoke his first word, it was mother, and when he said that, he was talking to her. So for Thor, though Freya's not his biological mother, the fact of Freya being the woman who raised him, that's one thing that he doesn't have to question. But at this time, this is when Angela took Odin to this arena, telling him if he wanted to fight somebody, like this was the place for him, when really Angela had just taken Odin here just to throw him in the middle of countless death matches. So at this point for Thor, with him just getting here, Odin had been here for some time. But with Thor getting here and saving Odin in the nick of time, keep in mind that prior to this, when Angela had asked the two of them to work together, Odin didn't want to help Thor, because from Odin's perspective, as a dad, with Thor being the king now, Odin wanted Thor to figure this out on his own. But with Thor showing up here and then saving his dad, Thor made it more so seem like an eye for an eye type of thing, which probably is a bad analogy, using those words specifically. But more or less Thor's like, I helped you clean up your mess, so now you can help me with something. And it's from here where Odin agrees to help Thor find Mjolnir, which really at this point is the two of them doing what Angela had asked, but of course Odin and Thor had to find their own way around to doing this. But it's from here where Odin takes Thor to Nidavellir, and Thor initially thinks that Odin is bringing him here to forge another hammer, but no, Odin's bringing Thor here, because each weapon that the dwarves cast is imbued with a portion of their souls, and because of that the dwarves can track anything that they've made anywhere across the stars. But when the two of them get here, to their surprise, they find that the forge has been wrecked. And it's not even as if this was showing signs of some type of fight, but this was just a complete slaughter. And they could tell just from the looks of it that it was a swift one at that, because the Val Ravens were killed without even moving from their perch. And with them walking inside and finding that all the dwarves are dead, as well as the forge just shattered, it doesn't take Thor and Odin long to realize that this was done by Mjolnir, which again, in relation to that cycle that we've been shown, born from the Forge of Rage comes annihilation. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.